as Joe Biden and the Dems, they can't be very bright, allow encourage the destruction of cities and take over cities by an incoherent mob bent on destruction of the family values of the world, of the Western world. You have to wonder, you have to ask yourself, what is it that they're offering, other than more taxes and all that? What are they offering? Right, let's have more taxes as a carrot, but what are they offering society as a whole, other than a dictatorship, an anti-free speech tyranny? Because they're really against free speech. You can't have a free speech conversation about much. So amongst these people, they all start screaming incoherently and quite mad. It's quite scary actually the way the left now are carrying on as individuals and in groups. It's really quite. There's never been anything like this raging mob before in history. All the billions of dollars spent on university and education have been totally wasted or used wrongly to create a whole cult of people who act against their own genetic benefit. Sensible people ask the ether questions. Like, it's normal for humans to ask questions. A very important thing about it is to ask, what is a human? A human is different to any other species because a human can ask questions. And even if you are Christian or religious person, in the religious books it says, if you ask, you shall receive. So it encourages you to ask questions about the universe you live in, so you can gain a greater understanding of it and benefit yourself or society by asking those questions. But the left are totally against anyone questioning any number of ideas that they have, because they're frightened of what it may be exposing people's mind if they did start to open up the mind by asking themselves questions. Why am I doing this? Why am I in Antifida or something like that? Why am I in this? Why can't we rationalize ourselves? Right? That makes an individual as a human, not a collective. A simple list of things that the left are offering suffices. Non-recognition of biological genetics, that they're saying there's no men and women anymore, which doesn't make sense, because we all know, you just get naked, you know that you're a man or a woman, regardless how anyone dresses. When they're naked, they can't actually design the male, the sex, the gender they are. It's not possible. You can't have a 8-inch penis and then say, oh, I'm a woman, because it doesn't make sense. It does not. Or you can't have a vagina, no penis, and say, I'm a man. You might be manly and you might be feminine, but you neither are a man or a woman. It's a difference between manly or unmanly, feminine or unfeminine. That's, of course, accepted. Lots of women are unfeminine. There's millions around these days who call feminists. And lots of men that are effeminated, turned into emasculated and semi-female. So we can see that is the case. Some are no longer recognised as men. You couldn't do a day's work of a man anyway. Destruction of Western families is the next one they've got to offer. Preferential treatment in Australia of black male criminals that bash women. Because obviously black women's lives count for nothing compared to black men. Because we had this Black Lives Matter thing, which I totally agree with. No one's going to disagree that there's racism in Australia and America, everywhere. There's racism. I mean, naturally, but the racism's on both sides. We're not going to get into pedantics, but racism's on both sides. But men in Australia, they bash their women, and that's why they end up in jail. And that somehow we've got to have sympathy for them. I mean, I don't understand. Black Lives Matter. What about the women? You know, women's lives matter. 1 minute women matter to the left, next minute they're ignored, depending on the political stand of the day. And want a destruction of the economy and employment in the cause of climate change. In Australia, we are 1/5 of 1 part per million of gross global carbon dioxide. You can see, compared with China's growth, we are nothing. In the scheme of global warming, we are irrelevant. But nonetheless, you can't argue with that anymore, which means the whole politics actually gone insane, actually. Unrelenting hatred and total intolerance to anyone that dare utter a non-prescribed thought. That is, if you talk to these people and say, well, I have a different opinion because I've done research. They won't argue with you. They won't tell you their rational reasons for it. They'll just call and attack you personally, which shows you that they're very, very limited in the way they have ability to debate things. They're very limited in the way they debate. It's always attack people personally, or you deny or sexist or racist or something. That's all they need to do, to put someone down and cause a group to attack them. And then there's the destruction of Western history, according to them, all right back to the Greeks. Right back to the Greeks. They want to destroy all the knowledge that has accumulated through the centuries, right back to the Greeks. The left want to destroy all knowledge, in other words. The root and path to knowledge is individual research into the history of its accumulation, and there's a massive history of it. It's a wonderful history all throughout the world. In China, the knowledge is just not pertaining to the West. The basic knowledge that is found all civilizations is across all civilizations. It's in the Chinese, and it's in the Greek, and it's in the Indian, and it's in Egyptian, and it's in the Assyrian, and it's in the West. They all have a sort of underlying foundation. So that's the bit the left misses, and it's all interconnected. There's no separation in this, They want to separate humanity out, and that means they're racist. They're encouraging racism, because when it's all interrelated for thousands and millions of years, humans have developed through an interrelation, a very slow, and there's never been no perfect way of doing it. There's no perfect way of doing it, never has been and never will be. So, but it works itself out over time. But they want some immediate change. And you can't have that. That only disturbs the pond and makes it worse. They want the destruction of the scientific principle and method. You can't have scientific principle anymore or method, which is proving a theory. You don't have to prove a theory. Just to have one and say that's the theory and say that's it. Then don't argue with it. You're not allowed to argue with it. Absolutely no ideas in regard to economic development. Left have no ideas whatsoever in regard to economic development other than tax the people more. There's nothing new in all of this. There's no actual revolution, in other words, within the left, other than the revolution that destroys society and destroys the whole means of productivity, which is all of what's all about. The encouragement, by example, and tacit support for mob violence. Now, Joe Biden and the Dems are encouraging this Antifa thing, where I don't even know what that is. It's just a word I've heard, and it's all these people in Seattle want to, I don't know what even they're making demand of what their demands are, but that there should be no families construct anymore and stuff like that. We'll go and tell that to the Indians and Chinese and all the black people in Africa who live, sustain their society through the family connections and all that. Go and tell all those people you can't have a family. But so, this is actually Tafida's attack on all races, not just one race. And therefore it should be wholly and totally condemned, or utterly as bad as racist as it gets, because it's against race itself. You can't support Black Lives Matter and be against race. It's a contradiction. Black Lives Matter, we're against races, because Antifa is against race. So it's a contradiction. It doesn't even, that's how incoherent these people are. They don't join the dots. Open support by civic leaders and therefore ABC, BBC and CNN for urban terrorism, which is what's happening in America. All blamed on Trump for obviously, I don't know how Trump to blame for setting fire to buildings and robbing and looting, but these people will not even indulge their own brains, and ask themselves, why are people, what's Donald Trump to do with people burning and looting? Nothing. It's just that people are criminals and want to criminals burn and loot. That's just basic facts here. There's nothing nice about people burn and loot, and then they're destroying their own employment and economy. In other words, the left are now openly admitting they're modified kind of Nazis. There's no doubt about that. There's an elite there. It's not like the Nazis of Hitler were really smart people, although that might be somewhere right there behind them, some really smart people behind this. But the people in the left, because they're not technically brilliant, they don't have any sort of practical skills, they couldn't build anything or do anything, just a sort of a squawking rabble, just a bunch of parrots and sheep getting along as a mob and making all this noise, but much noise is meaningless. So they're sort of a modified kind of a Nazi because they're fascists. They demand that everyone obey their orders and obey their tyranny, and want to ban free speech and individual expression. So they're actually a very dangerous, seriously dangerous mob to not just the West, but humanity itself. This is a disease what could spread through humanity and do a lot of destruction to humanity. Encouraging these young people, young men and women, to commit acts of treason against the state of America. So the victims of left's indoctrination, that's its political correctness is an indoctrination system, shall be put down, and that's what the idea is that somehow they entrap Trump into putting down this insurrection in America, therefore making him look like he's into violence. And that's the game what the left are playing right now. If the left had any leadership, like Joe Biden was a real leader, and he's not, he's a follower of orders, a puppet. That's all he is. And he would go up to Seattle and say to the young men, look, put your arms down. We don't want this in America. We're Americans. We're all together. No, he lives in a totally divided America. America's so divided now. It's basically two places. There's two places in America. It's two totally different. It's a bipolar country. There's no doubt. And it needs to. You can't get back together again. It's very difficult to know unless it would take a really great leader with the great ideas how to bring the people back together again, and that would take philosophy and the media as well to be involved in creating a philosophy. How do you get America back together again when half of the people are screaming at each other, another half are just trying to defend their right to have a family? The endless growth in government and the cost of supporting it is also what the left are involved with, because they it's like nepotism, cronyism. They employ people with no real practical skills, but they employ the politically correct to employ, and therefore you get a degeneration of ability to solve practical problems. Like, how do you solve the homeless problem in America? Very serious. How do you solve poverty? These are practical problems. These are not political problems. They're very practical problems. How do you solve these? They're also about spirituality and people's behaviour. You can't mention that people, their behaviour is their responsibility, and if they all behaved in a reasonably nice manner and polite manner, civic manner, then there would be very little crime, very few people in jail, and then everything would be nice and happy and hunky-dory, and there'd be very little, actually far less poverty, or a more stable family system. More and more stable the families are, the far less poverty and far greater happiness there is in society. It's very simple. There's a relentless pursuit against free speech, hateful, dishonest spin against opponents, black and white. If you can be black, it doesn't matter to the left. If you're black and you speak and you want to rationalise anything, you're going to be attacked as a white lackey or something like that. So it's not about Black Lives Matter at all. That is just a slogan. Black lives do matter, but not the ones that speak up and have a different point of view on how that lives might matter. Because really, if you've got brains and never go in America, you can get ahead and become president. Obama did. He was black, he became president. So there's nothing stopping black people becoming presidents in America, or film stars or anything like that. Make one, there's nothing stopping them becoming top of the game in anything, soccer, whatever it is, intellectual, academics. There's nothing stopping black people being anything they want, as long as they've got a basic family background and the education. They can go anywhere they like. There's nothing limits on what they can do. Obviously, to say such a thing is ridiculous. There's nothing remotely positive of any practical value that comes from the left anymore. They don't say anything. This is not a revolution in the normal sense of the word, because they can't even feed themselves. Most people will starve to death within a week if you wait for capital production of food and trucking and all that. They will starve within 2 weeks. They will be starving and turning and eating each other. But the most important, the bottom line in this, is the never-ending intergenerational decline in academic standards, through which the human resources are recruited into highly paid, anti-productive, easy-living jobs. And that's what's basically the big decline in Britain, Australia, Canada, and UK, and everywhere else, where as this politically correct way of being employed into government, they recruits like, and it lowers the whole standard of government down. So governments now become a top-heavy thing that is a burden upon society itself, and it feeds upon society. So it's creating a slave system for an elite. This everyone thinks, oh, this is going to be Marxism. It's not. It's actually creating a slave system with a top-heavy bunch of people who are basically useless, sponging on the rest of society, on their efforts and work they do. And this has happened before in history, and if you look at the falls of civilizations, we can see that there's several examples of how that happens as occurred before. And then you get onto the complete nepotism, and that which is employing family members, and cronyism, employing people who prefer their personality to rather than their abilities, to do a job. So you get in there with total corruption and total incompetence. So that's basically why the more Democrats there are in a place, the more likely there is poverty and homeless and disquiet and crime. So if you vote Democrats, Joe Biden, the Dems in, you're going to spread crime and poverty and disruption and corruption throughout society, because you can't say no. So you get chaos and disorder is what is the future of America. Because Joe Biden can't come together with Trump and say, look, Donald, yeah, we've got a president election, but on this we ought to work together for the sake of America. Right? And let's have an economic, let's argue on economics alone. What is our economic solution alone? Let's make the presidential debate on the economic solution at this particular time, rather than all these nefarious and ideological arguments that America's great. Well, it could be, but it's not anymore. It's lost its plot because of this massive purpose-created division on the left. Now, if Biden was a leader, a real leader, he would join with Trump in stopping this violence. That he cannot mean he's a coward. And the cowards are dangerous in power. Whoever Trump is, whoever he is, he's not a coward. And also, he's done a better job in America than any of them they admit, and that's why they don't like him. That's why the Dems don't like him. That's what they fear of, Trump getting a second term, consolidating the Republicans as they decline into the miasma of bullshit they're all involved with.